The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people had looked up at the night sky and wondered what waited among those distant lights. Now, finally, they knew. Admiral Sun stood on the bridge of the Earthship Horizon and watched the alien space station grow larger in the viewport. It was massive, bigger than any city on Earth. Thousands of ships moved around it like insects around a hive. Each ship belonged to a different species. Each species had been traveling among the stars while humans were still learning to make fire. "We are receiving permission to dock," said Captain from his station. He was a calm man who rarely showed emotion, but even he could not hide the wonder in his voice. Doctor stepped closer to the viewport. She was the team's language expert. She had spent 10 years learning every alien language that Earth's telescopes had captured. "The Galactic Confederation," she said softly, 300 species, 12,000 years of history, and we are finally here. Sun nodded. He was 60 years old with gray hair and a face marked by decades of service. He had fought in 3 wars on Earth. He had commanded the first mission to Mars, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. "Remember why we are here," he said to his crew. "Earth needs allies, we need technology, we need protection. The galaxy is vast and we are very small." The docking process took 2 hours. Then the doors opened, and humanity walked into the galaxy for the first time. The Confederation Council chamber was enormous. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in floating platforms that circled a central stage. Some had scales, some had fur, some had bodies made of crystal or gas. They all turned to watch as the human delegation entered. Sun felt their eyes on him. He felt their judgment. A commander descended from his platform. They were tall, nearly 3 meters, with hard shells covering their bodies. Their 4 arms ended in claws that could cut through metal. Commander was one of their most famous warriors. He had conquered 12 worlds. Walked around the humans slowly. He poked Sun's arm with one claw. A small cut appeared and blood dripped onto the floor. "So soft," said. His translator made his voice sound like grinding stones. "This is the great new species. They bleed from a touch. Their skin tears like paper." Laughter echoed through the chamber. Hundreds of aliens found this very funny. A representative slithered forward. There were reptiles with long bodies and cold eyes. They controlled most of the galaxy's trade. "They require 8 hours of unconsciousness every day," they said. "They call it sleep. 8 hours. A third of their lives spent helpless and dreaming." More laughter. Doctor's face was red with anger, but she stayed silent. Captain's hands were tight fists at his sides. Sun simply waited. A diplomat floated down on a gravity disk. They were beautiful, with silver skin and large, dark eyes. They were known for their wisdom and fairness. "Perhaps we should not judge too quickly," they said. "The humans have achieved much in a short time." "They achieved survival," replied. "Barely. Look at them. No claws, no venom, no armor, no wings. How did they become the dominant species on their planet? There must have been no competition." "We had competition," Sun said quietly. His voice carried across the chamber. "We had animals with claws longer than your arms. We had creatures with teeth that could crush bone. We had predators that could run faster than any human. We killed them all." The laughter stopped. "We killed them with rocks and sticks," Sun continued. "Then we learned to make spears, then arrows, then guns, then bombs. We did not need claws, Commander, we made our own." Stared at the human. For a moment something flickered in his eyes, then he laughed again. "Words," he said, "pretty words from a soft species." The council voted to accept humanity into the Confederation, but the vote came with conditions. Humans were classified as a protected species. They could not carry heavy weapons on their ships. They could not settle on valuable worlds. They would be watched and supervised like children. Sun accepted these terms with a polite smile. He had no choice. Earth was one small planet against an entire galaxy. For now, humans would play the role they were given. But not everyone accepted this situation quietly. Was 28 years old. She worked in the intelligence division of Earth's embassy on the Confederation station. Her job was to watch, listen, and learn. She was very good at her job. Every day she studied the alien species. She read their histories. She analyzed their military forces. She mapped their weaknesses. "They have forgotten," she said one night to General. The general was the secret head of Earth's military intelligence. Officially, Earth had no military intelligence. Officially, Earth was too primitive for such things. "Forgotten what?" asked. He was a thin man with sharp eyes and a quiet voice. "War," replied. "Real war. The Confederation has not faced a true threat in 3,000 years. They fight small battles over trade routes and mining rights. They have forgotten what it means to fight for survival." Nodded slowly, "And we have not forgotten." "No, sir. Humanity has been fighting for survival since we climbed down from the trees. It is in our blood. It is in our bones." Looked at the data on screen. It showed the galaxy's military forces, their positions, their strengths. It also showed their weaknesses. "Continue your work," he said. "Watch, learn, prepare." Months passed. Humanity built its embassy. Human traders began small businesses on the station. Human scientists studied alien technology. Everyone played their role. But in secret, other things were happening. The cargo ships that arrived from Earth carried more than supplies. Hidden in their holds were weapons and soldiers. The research stations that humans built in empty star systems were not just for research. They were fortresses in disguise. The civilian ships that traveled between worlds had engines that could outrun any Confederation patrol. Doctor continued her diplomatic work. She smiled at every insult. She bowed to every dismissal. But at night, she reported everything to Sun. "They truly believe we are nothing," she told him. "They look at us and see prey animals, soft, weak, harmless." Sun looked out at the stars. "My grandfather used to raise sheep," he said. "The wolves always underestimated them too. They thought sheep were just meat waiting to be eaten." "What happened?" "My grandfather got dogs, then he got fences, then he got guns." Sun turned to face her. "The wolves are all gone now. The sheep are still there." Smiled slightly. "Are we the sheep or the dogs in this story?" "We are the farmer," Sun replied. "And we have been watching the wolves for a very long time." Far away in the cold darkness between galaxies, something ancient was waking up. Something that had been waiting for 10,000 years. Something hungry. The Confederation continued its peaceful existence. The aliens continued to laugh at the soft humans. No one was watching the void, but was watching. And one day, her sensors detected something that made her blood run cold. "General," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "something is coming." The galaxy was about to learn a very important lesson. Soft does not mean weak, and the species that bleeds the easiest sometimes fights the hardest. The lesson would be written in fire and blood, and humanity would be holding the pen. Had not slept in 3 days. Her eyes burned. Her hands shook from too much coffee, but she could not look away from the screen. The signals were coming from the edge of the galaxy. No, not from the edge, from beyond it. From the vast empty darkness between galaxies where nothing should exist, where nothing could survive. Something was out there, and it was getting closer. "How many ships?" General asked. He stood behind her, his face pale in the light of the monitors. "I cannot count them," replied. "Hundreds, maybe thousands. The sensors cannot process the data fast enough." Was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Wake Admiral Sun and contact Earth, Priority Alpha." Priority Alpha had never been used before. It meant only one thing: humanity was facing extinction. The Confederation Council met in emergency session. For the first time since humanity had arrived, there was no laughter in the chamber. The alien representatives floated in their platforms, their faces showing fear and confusion. The elder said, his voice trembled, "After 10,000 years they have returned." Admiral Sun stood with the human delegation. "What are the?" he asked. The silence that followed was heavy with ancient terror. Finally, Commander spoke. Even his booming voice was quiet. "They ruled this galaxy before the Confederation existed. They were old when my species was young. They consumed everything. They took entire worlds and stripped them bare. They did not conquer. They did not negotiate. They simply ate." "What happened to them?" Doctor asked. "War, the greatest war in galactic history. Every species united against them. Billions died. Stars were destroyed, but finally we drove them out. They fled into the void between galaxies. We thought they would die there. Nothing can survive in that emptiness." "Clearly something can," Sun said. "The first attack came 3 days later. They hit a colony world called Fortress Prime. It was one of the most defended planets in the galaxy. 2 million warriors lived there. They had weapons that could crack moons. They had shields that could stop asteroid impacts. They destroyed everything in 6 hours. The news spread across the Confederation like a disease. Panic followed. They began moving their wealth to hidden locations. They called for peace talks. They demanded revenge but could not agree on how to achieve it. Captain watched the chaos from the embassy. "They are falling apart," he said to Sun. "No coordination, no unified command. Each species is thinking only of itself." 3,000 years of peace," Sun replied. "They have forgotten how to fight together. They have forgotten that war requires sacrifice." "What do we do?" Sun thought about his grandfather's farm again. He thought about wolves and sheep and farmers with guns. "We wait," he said, "and we watch. Our time will come." Brought her analysis to General that night. She had found something interesting in the attack patterns. "They are ignoring us," she said. "Human colonies, human ships, human stations. The scanners pass right over them." Leaned forward. "Why?" "They scanned us when they first arrived. They measured our biology, our technology, our military capacity, pulled up the data. And they dismissed us. We are too small, too weak, too soft. They think we are not worth the effort. They think we are food to be collected later, like storing grain for winter." Smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "They have made a mistake." "Yes, sir, a very large mistake." The Confederation Council called for human ships to help with evacuation efforts. They wanted humanity to carry refugees while the real warriors fought the. Admiral Sun attended the meeting where this was decided. "You want us to run away," he said calmly. "We want you to help," a representative replied. "This is not a fight for soft species. This is a war for survival. That will handle combat. You will handle logistics." The commander actually looked uncomfortable. Something had changed in him since Fortress Prime fell. He had lost friends there, family. "Perhaps," said slowly, "we should reconsider. The humans have shown some unexpected qualities." "What qualities?" they demanded. "They bleed when scratched. They sleep 1/3 of their lives. They cry when they are sad. What use are such creatures in war?" Sun said nothing. He simply nodded politely and left the chamber. That night he sent a coded message to Earth. The message contained only 4 words: "Begin Phase 2 immediately." Across human space, things began to change. The cargo ships opened their hidden compartments. Weapons emerged. Armor plating slid into place. Within hours, a fleet of unarmed trading vessels became a fleet of warships. The research stations powered up systems that had never been used. Defense grids activated. Missile batteries rose from underground bunkers. Scientists removed their lab coats and put on military uniforms. On Earth itself, 200 million reservists received the call. They had been waiting for this moment, training in secret, preparing for the day when humanity would need them. Doctor visited a human medical station near the front lines. She was no longer just a diplomat. She had trained as a field medic during the years of peace. Now she would use those skills. "Are you afraid?" a young nurse asked her. Thought about the question. "Yes," she admitted, "but fear is useful, it keeps you sharp, it keeps you alive." "The aliens say we are too emotional. They say fear will make us weak." Smiled. "The aliens have forgotten something important. Fear can make you freeze, but it can also make you fight harder than you ever imagined possible. A mother protecting her child feels fear. That does not make her weak. It makes her dangerous." General stood in a command center hidden deep under the Earth Embassy. Around him, officers monitored the movement of forces. Screens showed the positions of every human ship, every hidden weapon, every secret soldier. "How long until we are ready?" he asked. 7 days, his second-in-command replied. "The main fleet will be assembled by then." "We may not have 7 days." As if the universe had heard him, an alarm sounded. A strike force had changed course. They were heading toward a refugee convoy, 600,000 civilians, including many children. The Confederation had no ships close enough to help. The convoy would be destroyed in 4 hours. Looked at the map. A human cargo fleet was nearby. Officially, they were carrying food supplies. Unofficially, they were carrying enough weapons to fight a small war. "Sir," the officer asked, "what do we do? If we reveal ourselves now, we lose the element of surprise." Thought about the choice. Military logic said to wait, let the die, preserve the secret, win the bigger war. But was human, and humans did not think only with logic. "Send the fleet," he ordered. "Save those people." "But sir, I know what it costs. Send them anyway." 3 hours later, the strike force encountered something unexpected. The soft humans, the prey species, the creatures that bled from a scratch. The humans did not run. They did not hide. They did not beg for mercy. They opened fire. The battle lasted 2 hours. 3 human ships were destroyed. 400 humans died. But when the smoke cleared, the force was gone. Every single enemy ship had been destroyed. And 600,000 refugees were alive. Across the Confederation, species that had laughed at humanity fell silent. They watched the battle recordings with shock. They saw human ships ram enemy vessels rather than retreat. They saw human crews fighting until the last breath. "What are they?" a trader whispered. Commander watched the recording again and again. He remembered mocking these creatures. He remembered cutting Sun's arm and laughing at the blood. Now he understood something the galaxy had forgotten. Blood was not weakness. Blood was what you were willing to spill for the things you loved. And humans, it seemed, were willing to spill quite a lot of it. The storm had arrived, and the soft species was about to show the galaxy what they were truly made of. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. In 1 week, humanity transformed from the weakest member of the Confederation into something terrifying. Captain led the first official human combat fleet into occupied space. His ship, the Soul, had been called a research vessel just 7 days ago. Now it carried enough weapons to destroy a small moon. "Enemy fleet detected," his tactical officer reported. 47 warships. They are moving to intercept." Studied the enemy formation on his screen. The ships were massive, black vessels covered in organic-looking armor. They moved like predators, surrounding their prey before striking. "They expect us to run," said calmly. "All ships maintain course, weapons ready." "Sir, we are outnumbered 3-1. "I can count, Lieutenant. Maintain course." The commander must have been confused. Every other species ran from superior numbers. Every other species understood when they were beaten. But these strange, soft creatures kept coming, their weapons charging, their shields at full power. The first volley came from the energy beams crossed the darkness of space, slamming into human shields. The Soul shook violently. Consoles sparked. Crew members were thrown from their chairs. "Return fire," ordered. All ships pattern Delta. Human weapons were not as powerful as weapons. Human shields were not as strong. But humans had something they did not expect: creativity born from centuries of fighting each other. The human fleet split into small groups, each group targeting a single enemy ship. While they tried to maintain their formation, humans danced around them, striking weak points, overwhelming defenses. One human cruiser took heavy damage. Its engines failed. It began drifting toward a destroyer. "Tell them to abandon ship," the tactical officer said. "No," replied, "watch." The crippled cruiser did not abandon ship. Instead, it redirected all remaining power to its engines and accelerated directly at the destroyer. The collision destroyed both vessels. The fleet hesitated. This had never happened before. No species deliberately sacrificed ships. No species treated death so casually. "They are afraid," said. "For the first time in 10,000 years, they do not understand their enemy. Press the attack." The battle lasted 6 hours. Humanity lost 12 ships and 800 crew members. They lost all 47 vessels. Word of the victory spread across the Confederation like fire. In council chambers and military bases, aliens watched the recordings with disbelief. "How?" a general asked. "They are soft, they are weak. How did they win?" Admiral Sun answered that question in a message broadcast to all Confederation species. "You call us soft because we bleed," he said. "But we have been bleeding since the first human walked the earth. We bled when we fought animals bigger than ourselves. We bled when we fought each other in wars that lasted centuries. We bled and we kept fighting because that is what humans do." He paused. His old eyes were hard as stone. "You have had 3,000 years of peace. You have forgotten what war truly means. We have never forgotten. War is in our history. War is in our blood. And if you want to survive this enemy, you will let us show you how it is done." The Confederation Council met in emergency session. For the first time, humans were invited to speak not as a protected species, but as equals. Doctor attended the meeting as a medical advisor. She had spent the past week treating wounded soldiers from both human and alien ships. Her hands were steady despite the exhaustion in her eyes. Commander approached her before the session began. The great warrior looked uncertain, which was strange for a species that valued confidence above all else. "You saved my life," he said. Blinked, "I do not understand." "During the evacuation of Station 7, my ship was damaged. I was wounded. Your medical team extracted me and treated my injuries." He touched a scar on his arm. "A human doctor stitched this wound with her own hands." "That is our job. We help those who need help. Even those who mocked you, even those who called you prey." Looked at the massive warrior. A year ago, he had laughed at humanity. He had cut Sun just to prove how fragile humans were. "Yes," she said simply, "even them." Was silent for a long moment. Then he did something no had ever done to a human. He lowered his head in a gesture of respect. "I was wrong about your species," he said. "We all were." General coordinated the war effort from his hidden command center. Stood beside him, analyzing data streams from across the galaxy. "They are adapting," she reported. "They have started targeting human colonies specifically. They no longer see us as irrelevant." "Good," said. Looked at him with surprise. "Good, they are attacking our people. And that means they are afraid. They are afraid of what we have become. An enemy that fears you is an enemy that makes mistakes." Thought about this. She had spent her whole career studying weakness. Now she was learning something new. Fear was also a weakness. "What do we do?" she asked. Pointed to a map of the galaxy. "They expect us to defend our colonies. Instead, we will attack theirs." "We do not know where their colonies are." "No, but we know where their supply lines are. We know where their command ships gather, we know their patterns." He smiled grimly. "You taught me that, you watched, you learned. Now we use that knowledge." Human special forces began striking deep behind enemy lines. They did not attack with massive fleets. They attacked with small teams, quiet insertions, explosive surprises. A refueling station disappeared in nuclear fire. A command ship was found drifting, its entire crew dead from poison gas. A weapons factory exploded from the inside. They had no idea how to respond. Their enemies were supposed to face them directly. Their enemies were supposed to fight with honor and predictability. Instead, the humans struck like ghosts, appeared from nowhere, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. "They fight like prey animals," a commander reported. "They hide, they run, they use tricks instead of strength." His superior, an ancient lord who had survived the First War, disagreed. "No," the lord said, "they fight like predators, real predators, the kind that does not waste energy on fair fights, the kind that waits in shadows and strikes at the throat." "What do we do?" The lord did not answer. For the first time he felt something he had almost forgotten: fear. Captain led another battle 3 weeks into the war. This time they came with 200 ships. They had learned from their previous defeat. They stayed in tight formation. They protected their weak points. It did not matter. Human tactics evolved faster than they could adapt. Used the enemy's tight formation against them. He sent drone ships loaded with explosives into the center of their fleet. When the drones detonated, the chain reaction destroyed half the enemy force. "Cowardly," an officer transmitted. "You do not fight with honor." Replied with words his grandfather had taught him. "Honor is for ceremonies, war is for winning." The battle ended with humanity victorious once again, but this time the cost was higher. Own ship was badly damaged. An explosion took his left arm. His crew found him at his command chair, still giving orders, blood soaking his uniform. "Sir, you need medical attention," his first officer said. Looked at the stump where his arm had been. "Later, the battle is not finished." "The battle is won, sir. They are retreating." Only then did allow himself to be carried to the medical bay. Even there, he continued directing operations until the anesthesia finally pulled him under. He was back in command 1 week later. His new prosthetic arm was still calibrating. The connection points still hurt. None of that mattered. The galaxy watched, the galaxy learned, and the galaxy began to understand. Soft did not mean weak. Soft meant flexible. Soft meant adaptable. Soft meant surviving wounds that would kill harder species. The wolves had misjudged the sheep, and now the sheep were hunting them. The Battle of Horizon's Edge was the bloodiest day in human history among the stars. Admiral Sun had known the attack was coming. Intelligence from his network had warned him 3 days in advance. He had prepared everything he could. It was not enough. They came with 500 warships. They came with weapons that could crack planets. They came with 10,000 years of hatred driving them forward. Sun had 60 ships. 60 ships and 30,000 men and women who knew they would probably die. "Today we hold the line," he told his fleet. "Behind us are 12 colony worlds, 4 billion humans. If we fall, they die, so we will not fall." The battle began at dawn station time. It lasted 18 hours. Sun watched ship after ship disappear from his display. He heard the final transmissions of crews who knew death was coming. He gave orders that sent friends into fire. They broke through the first defensive line, then the second. They pushed toward Horizon Station itself, where civilian transports were still evacuating. "Sir," his communications officer said, her voice breaking, "they are broadcasting a demand. They want our surrender. They promise quick deaths if we comply." "Quick deaths," Sun repeated. "How generous." He thought about his wife, waiting on Earth. His, who had never seen a real tree because they grew up on space stations. His ancestors, who had survived wars and famines and disasters that should have ended humanity. "Tell them no," he said. "Tell them we do not surrender. Tell them they will have to kill every last one of us." The final stand at Horizon's edge became legend. Human ships that could no longer fight used themselves as shields. Crews ejected into space to man defense platforms. Civilians grabbed weapons and joined the battle. When reinforcements finally arrived, led by Captain and his rebuilt fleet, they found something incredible. The Armada had been destroyed. 500 enemy ships reduced to burning debris. Humanity had lost 12 capital ships. 40,000 humans had died. The survivors were wounded, exhausted, and barely able to stand. But they were alive, and the colonies behind them were safe. Doctor walked through the medical wards for days without rest. There were too many wounded, too few supplies, too much pain. A young warrior lay in one of the beds. He had been part of a joint operation with human forces. A weapon had torn through his armor, leaving wounds that his own medics could not treat. "Why help me?" he asked as she changed his bandages. "I am not human, my people mocked yours." Did not look up from her work. "You fought beside us, that makes you family." "Family, we are different species." "Family is not about blood, family is about choice. We choose to help those who need help, that is what makes us human." They had no response. He simply watched as this soft, fragile creature worked to save his life with steady hands and tired eyes. Meanwhile, on the colony world of New, another miracle was happening. They had landed ground forces, 10,000 warriors against a colony of 200,000 civilians. There was no military force to defend them, no fleet to rescue them, just ordinary people facing certain death. Sargent had been a teacher before the war. She taught history to children aged 10 to 15. She had never fired a weapon in anger. But she had studied human history. She knew what her ancestors had done when facing impossible odds. She knew about resistance fighters and guerrilla wars and the stubborn refusal to die quietly. "We cannot beat them in open battle," she told the other survivors. "So we will not fight in open battle. We will make them bleed for every street, every building, every room." The siege of New lasted 3 months. 3 months of hiding in tunnels. 3 months of ambushes and traps and midnight attacks. 3 months of watching friends die and refusing to give up. Organize the civilians into fighting units. Old men became snipers. Teenage girls became bomb makers. Children carried messages through passages too small for warriors. When the rescue fleet finally broke through the blockade, they expected to find a conquered world. Instead, they found standing in the ruins of the capital city, covered in blood and dirt, surrounded by the bodies of commanders. "You are late," she said to the rescue team. "We were starting to run out of ammunition." She was 24 years old. She had personally killed 3 commanders. The colony had lost 50,000 people, but the remaining 150,000 were free. The Confederation Council met to discuss the war's progress. For the first time, humans sat at the center of the chamber, not the edges. "We do not understand," a representative said. "You fight, you die, you keep fighting. Why, what drives this? Madness." General stood to answer. He was thin and tired. He had not slept properly in months, but his voice was strong. "You called us soft," he said. "You were right, we are soft. We feel everything deeply. Pain, fear, love, loss. When one of us dies, we all feel it. When one of us suffers, we all suffer." He looked around the chamber at the alien faces watching him. "That softness is not weakness. It is why we fight harder than any species born with armor, because we know exactly what we have to lose. We know the weight of every death. We carry that weight, and we keep fighting anyway." The chamber was silent. "You have forgotten this," continued. 3,000 years of peace made you forget that war is not just about weapons and tactics. War is about will, the will to endure, the will to sacrifice, the will to keep going when everything tells you to stop. He paused. Humans have been fighting since we learned to stand upright, not because we enjoy it, because we had no choice. Our world was harsh. Our predators were stronger. Our only advantage was our refusal to die. The representative looked uncomfortable. We did not know. No, you looked at our soft skin and our fragile bodies and you saw weakness. You did not see the millions of years of survival that made us this way. You did not see the history of wars and plagues and disasters that we overcame. Sat down, the message was clear. That night, the Confederation Council voted to give humanity full military authority over the war effort. Admiral Sun became Supreme Commander of all Allied forces. "Are you ready for this?" Doctor asked him privately. Sun looked at the star map showing enemy positions. They were being pushed back, but they were far from defeated. The war could last years. More people would die. "No," he admitted. "I am not ready. I do not think anyone can be ready for this responsibility." He straightened his shoulders. But ready or not, the job must be done. Humans have always been good at doing impossible jobs. Across the galaxy, the tide was turning. Not because humans were the strongest or the fastest or the most numerous, because they simply refused to stop. Commander, now fighting alongside human forces, described it best in his report to the High Command. "They are the most confusing species I have ever encountered," he wrote. "They cry over their dead. They show mercy to prisoners. They rescue enemies who wounded them. By all logic, these behaviors should make them weak. Instead, they make them terrifying. Because an enemy who shows compassion is an enemy who fights for something greater than survival. An enemy with something to love is an enemy who will never, ever give up." The price of softness was high. Every feeling cut deeper. Every loss hurt more. Every death left scars that would never fully heal. But that same softness created something that had never faced. An enemy that would walk through fire for a stranger. An enemy that would die for an idea. An enemy that would fight not just to win, but to protect something worth saving. The price of softness was exactly what made humanity worth the price. The war had lasted 2 years. 2 years of fire and blood and tears. 2 years of sacrifice and loss and stubborn survival. Now it was ending. Had found what they needed. Months of intelligence work, countless intercepted messages, dozens of agents who never came home. All of it led to one location, this hidden base in the void between galaxies. "Are you certain?" Admiral Sun asked. "Yes, sir." His voice was steady despite the exhaustion in her eyes. "This is where they rebuild their forces. This is their heart. If we destroy it, the war is over." Sun looked at the map. The base was far from any friendly territory. Getting there would be dangerous. Fighting there would be worse. "How many ships do they have?" 800, maybe more. "And we have 342, if we gather everything." The numbers were not good, but numbers had never been good for humanity. They had won anyway. "Gather the fleet," Sun ordered. "Every ship, every soldier, every ally willing to fight." 3 weeks later, the largest combined fleet in galactic history assembled at the edge of known space. Human ships flew beside cruisers. Trading vessels, now armed with weapons, joined science ships converted for war. Captain commanded the human vanguard. His prosthetic arm gleamed in the bridge lights. He had learned to use it as naturally as his original limb. General coordinated strategy from the command ship, stood beside him, watching the final calculations. Doctor had refused to stay behind. She led the medical corps, ready to save as many lives as possible from what was coming. And Commander, the who had once mocked humanity, commanded the Allied assault force. He had requested the position personally. "It is time," Sun announced to the fleet. For 2 years we have fought, we have bled, we have buried our friends and kept fighting. Today we finish this." The fleet jumped into the void. They were waiting. 800 ships against 342. The odds should have crushed any hope. But the Allied fleet was not fighting for odds. They were fighting for something they could never understand. "Attack pattern Omega," Sun ordered. "All ships weapons free." The final battle began. Space turned to fire. Weapons lit up the eternal darkness of the void. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes that faded too quickly. The screams of the dying mixed with the shouts of the living. Led his forces directly at the enemy center. His ships took terrible damage, but they kept pushing, creating an opening for the main assault. Brought his warriors through that opening. For the first time in the war, fought with human tactics. They used ambush and deception instead of direct assault. They targeted weak points instead of charging strength. "We learned from the best," growled as his ships tore through enemy formations. They fought desperately. They knew this was their end. They had no retreat, no reinforcement, no hope, but they refused to die easily. Hours passed. The Allied fleet was being destroyed. 100 ships lost. 200. The enemy was losing more, but they had more to lose. Sun watched his fleet dying and made a decision. "All ships focus fire on the central station. Everything we have." "Sir, that will leave us exposed." "I know, do it anyway." 300 Allied ships turned their weapons on the command station. The concentrated fire was massive, a wall of energy that nothing could withstand. The station's shields held for 30 seconds. Then they failed. The station cracked. Air and fire erupted from the breach, and then it exploded, taking 50 ships with it. The explosion sent shockwaves through the enemy fleet. Command lines were disrupted. Coordination collapsed, though for the first time in their history panicked. And then something unexpected happened. They sent a transmission, not an attack, a plea. "Stop, we surrender, we will leave, we will never return, just stop." The Allied fleet held position, weapons still charged, ready to continue the destruction. Sun looked at the transmission. He thought about all the people who had died, all the worlds that had burned, all the pain and suffering they had caused. He thought about mercy, about revenge, about the future. "You spent 10,000 years in the void," he said in his response, "dreaming of revenge, nursing hatred. You would return eventually, perhaps in another 10,000 years when we are forgotten." The transmission became desperate. "We swear, we will never return, we will die in the void." Sun continued. "Humans sleep 8 hours a day. That is a lot of time to dream, and we dream of a future where our children never face what we faced." He gave the order. "Continue the attack, destroy them all." The final battle lasted 9 days. When it ended, there was gone, every ship destroyed, every station burned, an ancient threat erased from existence. The cost was terrible. Humanity lost 112 ships. 15,000 humans never came home, but it was done. The war was over. In the months that followed, the galaxy tried to rebuild. Worlds that had been by battle began to heal. Species that had nearly been destroyed started to grow again. And humanity was no longer laughed at. Doctor was appointed as humanity's first full ambassador to the Confederation. At her inauguration ceremony, Commander led the honor guard. The scar on his arm, the one she had stitched during the war, was visible beneath his ceremonial armor. "I was wrong about your species," he said during the ceremony. "We all were." Smiled, "We surprised ourselves sometimes." Sargent returned to teaching, but her classroom now included students from across the galaxy. Young and sat beside human children learning about history, learning about survival, learning about hope. "Why do we study human history?" a young asked her one day. Thought about the question. She thought about the tunnels of new, the friends she had lost, the choices she had made. Because humans made every mistake possible, she said. We fought wars over silly things. We hurt each other for no reason. We nearly destroyed ourselves 100 times. She paused. But we learned. We grew. We survived. And if we can do it, so can anyone. Captain took command of the first joint human-alien peacekeeping fleet. His ships patrolled the borders of known space, watching for threats, protecting the innocent. You could retire, his first officer told him. You have done enough. Flexed his prosthetic arm. It moved perfectly now, as natural as flesh. The job is not about doing enough. The job is about doing what needs to be done. General retired to write a book about the war. He called it The Soft Species. It became required reading at every military academy in the Confederation. A young cadet approached him at a lecture one day. "How did you do it?" the cadet asked. "How did such a weak species defeat such a powerful enemy?" Thought about the question for a long moment. "We were never weak," he said finally. "We were soft. There is a difference. Weak things break. Soft things bend." He smiled slightly. "And soft things that have been bent too far have a way of snapping back harder than anyone expects." An admiral's son. He returned to Earth. He walked in his grandfather's fields, now tended by robots but still green and growing. He watched the sun set behind mountains that humans had been watching for thousands of years. A young reporter found him there, seeking an interview. "How did humanity accomplish what older species could not?" she asked. Son thought about the question. He thought about all the battles, all the deaths, all the moments of terror and triumph in terrible choice. "We are soft," he said at last. "We feel pain deeply. We love fiercely. We grieve terribly. That softness is not our weakness. It is why we fight harder than any species born with armor. We know exactly what we have to lose." 1,000 years later, humanity was no longer called the soft species. They were called the guardians. They protected the weak. They fought the battles that others could not win. They remembered what the galaxy had forgotten. And across 300 worlds, children of every species grew up hearing the same bedside story. When the darkness came, the soft ones stood firm. When the strong fled, the weak remained. When the galaxy judged them too gentle for war, they proved that the softest hearts forge the hardest steel. On the anniversary of the final battle, a new monument was unveiled on the Confederation capital world. It showed a human hand reaching toward the stars. The hand was soft, unarmored, vulnerable. And it was clenched into a fist. The inscription below it read, "They called us soft, they were right, and that was their greatest mistake." The stars remembered, the galaxy remembered, and humanity continued to do what they had always done. They survived, they fought, they loved, and they never ever gave up. Some species were born to rule, some were born to conquer. Humanity was born to endure, and in the end that made all the difference.